noticed last episode was a little wobbly. Sorry about that for anyone with motion sickness. But hello! I am Chanel, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I'm a grad student in Boulder, Colorado, researching smart textiles and creative technology, which is a really cool blend of, like, all of my interests and skills. So I'm a knitter, spinner, designer, and weaver, just kind of all of those things sometimes. This is episode 40 of the Pipernell podcast, which I can't believe I have now 40 episodes of me screaming into the void and updating it on my crafting. Today is Wednesday, December 19th. It's been over 2 months since I've made a new episode. It's finals week, so I finally have time for a new episode, and if that's contradictory, emphasis on the grad student part, because all of my, like, finals were, I didn't have exams, I just had presentations, and so I have no actual, like, tests to take this week, which is amazing. So on the social medias, you can find me mostly on, best way to keep up with me is Instagram as Pipernell, Pipernell. I also have a Facebook page, which is mostly reposts of Instagram, but sometimes, because I use Facebook a lot, I will also post stuff there. And that's also Pipernell. It's Piper with a space between Piper and Nell. And on Ravelry, you can also find me as Pipernell, and that's where you can also find my designs under my legal name, Chanel Wu, S-H-A-N-E-L. That's the perfume with an S. Wu, W-U. And I also have a podcast group there that I really need to update. That's the Pipernell podcast. And I could also make it into more of a resource for my design. So if you have feedback on that, let me know. I just need to get a lot of stuff together. But to get stuff together for this episode, let's give you an overview of stuff. So I have some news on design stuff. I have a lot of knitting to talk about. No spinning, unfortunately. I have some weaving and life updates and that will include kind of a reflection on this year of 2018 with the 2018 Make 9 and stuff. Because it's going to be the last episode of this calendar year with my schedule. So let's jump straight into news. I have an upcoming pattern release, the Taba socks, which stands for There and Back Again. That's been testing for the past couple of weeks, and it's going to be ready to release on December 24th, which is Christmas Eve. So it's perfect for your Christmas Eve cast on if you're doing that. The Taba socks are, and because this was a while ago, and I'm really trying to unclog my design pipeline, but it's kind of going. So the Taba socks they're socks, but they're more slippers or house socks to wear around. They are a worsted weight, I tried to make it universally sized, so you can make it for any size foot. Of course, all genders. And it is a worsted weight pair of slippers that has a unique construction where you are working you're working back and forth the entire way, and there are no short rows. And you basically work down the front of the foot and back around the toe, and you join as you go up the sole and around the heel and back up to the leg. You are joining as you go. So I think my testers have been having fun with it, and I hope that when it comes out, you will have fun with that pattern too. That's the Taba, and I'm going to try to keep this train of designs going, so I will be testing my Druid Crown hat pattern soon. It's going to be a stranded Sport to DK weight hat, that's mostly stockinette with just a band of stranded colorwork to match the Druid Circle sweater that I put out earlier this year. And hopefully that will hold me to that. But that's all I have for news. So let's go on to knitting. I've been doing quite a lot of knitting. Well, maybe it's just because I've had some time between last episode and this episode to get stuff done, so I feel like I have a lot to show you. when I'm in the thick of like school stuff, I felt like I didn't have a lot of knitting that was getting done. But now I'm looking back, I'm like, yeah, I did quite a lot. So, my first thing that I want to show is an FO, and I'm wearing it now. I'm wearing the Klein sweater. The pattern's Klein, C-L-I-N-E. I wonder if it's the same as like incline or like decline, like that root word. The designer is Julie Hoover, who puts out all these awesome, like very wearable, a lot of very wearable patterns, lots of garments. So the Klein is one of those like basics with the twist patterns. It's a very modified raglan, so that the raglan shaping is really wide and creates a nice like drop shoulder batwing, dolman, that's the word she used. Batwing-ish dolman silhouette, but it's a very roomy raglan, and I find it really comfy. It's slightly cropped. The model is shown wearing it a little bit under the natural waistline, and I knitted to about the same length. So, but that sizing stuff, I'm going to touch upon because the yarn that I used is Knit Picks Andean Treasure in the colorway Mystery Heather. It's this not really, really nice, like dusky gray. But it's 100% baby alpaca. It's classified as a DK weight, which is what the pattern calls for. And when I swatched with the needle size recommended, I did get gauge, but because it's 100% alpaca, I was looking at, people have made extremely like fitted sweaters with this yarn. I don't know how well they wore, but I was really worried about the alpaca yarn growing as I kept wearing this thing. It has a really, really nice drape. So I actually sized down a needles. I went down a needle size, so I knew I'd be coming out with a slightly smaller sweater with less ease, but I anticipate that this will kind of grow a little as I keep wearing it. The seams will really keep it structured, and the denser gauge does it balances out the like kind of drape of the alpaca with a little bit more bounce and spring. So I really like it. I have definitely noticed, I've worn this a few times by now. Finished it about a month ago. Whoops. But it has definitely grown even just a little bit in the couple times I've worn it since I've finished it. I didn't wet block it at all. I've just been wearing it straight off the needles, and I'm going to wash it soon, so I'll see how it behaves before and after the washing. It's really, really comfy and warm. I've noticed, like, when I first put it on, maybe for, like, the first couple of hours or so, it feels a little hairy and prickly. It's probably the alpaca, and I don't know, just, I guess a warning if you're trying to wear a, like, pure alpaca sweater right next to your skin. I'm not wearing an undershirt or anything under this. I guess my skin's not that sensitive, so I can wear pretty scratchy wools right next to my skin. So yeah, just, I guess take my notes on comfort, next to skin comfort, with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's my Klein sweater. It's a really nice basic. I will definitely wear this for a long time. My next project is also an FO. Like I said, I have some stuff to show, which is great. So this was a test knit I was working on for my friend slash fellow designer Ellie of Skandir, and I was one of her testers for the, let me get this right, Hjaltland socks. So it's a stranded Fair Isle style sock pattern that she put out, and you actually have options for a 2-color or multicolor kind of true Fair Isle style. Obviously, I chose the Fair Isle multicolor style option in the pattern, and so the sizing for this pattern is based on your needle size. If you have a larger foot, you go to a larger needle size. If you have a smaller foot, like me, I wear a US Woman 6, just about. So I went all the way down to a US 1, or 2.25 millimeter needle for these socks, which also gets me, for me, I really, really love the denseness of stranded color work. But the trade-off is that this isn't very elastic, as you can see. So this pattern is meant to be knit with 0 ease. It should be exactly your foot and leg circumference when it's knit. So the yarn that I used, I could list out all of them. I've noticed that, like, I can remember really fine details about, like, the yarns that I'm using. I can't remember people's names for the first, like, 10 times I meet them. My brain is a trash heap. So all of these are sock yarns, so they have wool. They're a wool and nylon blend. However, most of them are merino blend, so you have like Knit Pick Stroll or Cascade Heritage. I basically just dug through all of my kind of solid to tonal scraps or leftovers from previous sock or other like stranded patterns, which is really nice. I really like the idea of using like more sock scraps for like a super scrappy like Fair Isle project. I'm wondering if I could get like an entire garment out of the scraps that I have. There'd be so many ends to weave in, but I'll talk about that later. So with some of them are non-merino. Some of the sock yarns are non-merino, and those I actually took care to use in the toe, the heel, and the cuff, because those are, well, at least the toe and the heel are higher wear areas. The cuff just matches it nicely. So the toe and heel, the two colors, the white and this medium blue, are Regia and Lion Brand Sockies, both of which are non-merino wool, very sturdy, very hard wearing, will last through the apocalypse and back. So, a couple of notes about, this was really my first like true Fair Isle knit. I had done a lot of stranded color work, and I figured it was time for me to finally dive into Fair Isle. One thing that really intimidated me about Fair Isle in the past was choosing colors. I have gotten really hung up on choosing colors before, and Fair Isle is, you know, this uses 6 colors, so it's upwards of like 4 or 5 colors, and I thought I'd just be paralyzed with uncertainty and, what's the word I'm looking for? Indecisiveness. But one thing that really helped me pick out the colors, well, one was laying out all the colors I had, but last episode I talked about a book that I had gotten by Mary Jane Mucklestone, her 200 Fair Isle Motifs book. It has a nice guide on choosing colors and what you should look at in terms of their values, their hue contrasts, so like where they are on the color wheel, how light or dark they are. And one thing that helped me was kind of this unifying, you have a background color with what's it called? I don't know, it's close in hue, but it's brighter. It's as a kind of pop color, which I used this bright gold for. And that was really nice, and I really love how it looked. So it was that, like, kind of how to pick that mix of light and dark, bright and muted colors that really, I feel like, helped this project be successful. Besides that, other, like, Fair Isle things that I learned was I have a lot of ends to weave in. There was so many freaking ends. I think I did a pretty decent job. This is where the beginning/end of the round was. And I noticed that when I was weaving in my first few ends, if I just kept weaving them in at the beginning of the round, I'd have this huge pile up of ends at, you know, kind of creating like a seam at the beginning and at the round transition. So what I ended up doing was I would take the end and I would duplicate stitch over once in a while over 1/2 inch or 1 inch, depending on how dense the ends were, the cut ends were. And I could go to the left or to the right. So that just helped spread out the ends as I was weaving it in, so that all of that bulk didn't end up in one place. on the sock. And also it helped me, because I use duplicate stitch to kind of go over the round transition, it really helps these motifs kind of look a little bit smoother in the round. Yeah. These were all super fun. One thing I really liked was that there were no long floats, which I think is kind of a trademark of Fair Isle. And it just flew by. It was pretty addictive because I would want to get to the next color or the next motif, and I just really couldn't put it down. Plus I was knitting on a deadline, but I only have this one sock. I haven't started the next one. And then the last thing is, this is not a super positive thing about this project, because it's been a while since I did corrugated rib on a project or had done this kind of like 1x1 color switching stockinette. And I forgot how much your stitch gauge changes when you're knitting stranded. So this toe is actually really narrow here at the tip. I noticed it after I cast on it, I was going through the toe, because this was a toe up pattern, by the way. Though it has options for toe up and cuff down. However, after I cast on the toe and I knit a few rounds, I noticed that the cast on point was way too pointy. So I made the toe a little extra long, increased, and so that it would be the right width when I ended the increases. But when I put it on, this part kind of flaps empty. So I've had thoughts about ripping out the toe, re-knitting it, or like cutting it off, knitting a new toe and grafting it on. I'm not sure. And then the corrugated rib, and this is a bad habit of mine with all of my socks. I've noticed that I knit the ribbing of my cuffs really tight. So with corrugated ribbing, that was made even worse, because corrugated ribbing is not stretchy at all. And I've worn this a couple of times, mostly to bed. It's really warm and nice, but it's a fight to get it over my heel. So I think I should also rip out the cuff and re-knit it. As I knit the second one, I am so unmotivated to do that. Maybe I should just like hang this up somewhere because it's really pretty. But yeah, lessons in Fair Isle, and lessons in stranded sock knitting. Yeah, this was my first pair of stranded socks. So after this project, I was really on a Fair Isle kick, and I had a pattern that's been on my to knit list for a long time, and it's also on my 2018 Make 9, so I needed to get that off the list. So my next project that I have is also an FO. I finished it this morning, just weaving in all the ends. Again, going back to weaving in ends in Fair Isle, lots of ends to weave in. This one wasn't as bad. So I knit the Blue Hour gloves, the pattern's Blue Hour gloves, H-O-U-R. And the author is Ellen Gill. I'll link all of the Ravelry stuff in the show notes, which I will definitely do this time. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to binge write the show notes for the past 3, this episode and the past 2. Okay, so again, the yarn, I used assorted fingering weight yarns. Not all of these were sock yarns because I was not as bound to the hardware that socks undergo. So these gloves, I could use some of my more like woolly, like pure wool yarns. Like this lime green is Knit Picks palette, which is 100% Highland wool. I really like it for color work because it's 2-ply, so it sits very nicely. This bright orange that's actually has some little speckles in it, or just like kind of like little undyed specks, is from Primrose Yarn Company. I forget. No, I used a little bit. I used most of it in my Excuse Me shawl, but I just had little bits of it left over. It's this really bouncy 100% merino yarn. So I personally, even though it doesn't lay like most like a traditional 2-ply yarn in colorwork, it gives such a nice squish to the fabric. I really liked using it. The rest is, yeah, pretty much sock yarn. This dark green is actually a 100% BFL yarn, so it has a very different feel, and it kind of, if you notice, it kind of spreads out more than the other yarns. But anyway, this was a really fun knit. This was my the past few weeks, the past month, when I was on vacation for Thanksgiving. I was visiting my family, and I brought this along as a travel project because it's pretty portable, even though it was carrying around a lot of yarn. So they fit perfectly, and I put them on. And as a bonus, I can use them with touchscreens. I'll tell you why later. So I made a lot of modifications. I made a lot of modifications to the pattern. I like the pattern. I just had to modify it a lot to get the fit that I wanted. So the pattern is, there's one size for the pattern. Honestly, I would totally go and buy the pattern. I would like it for, like, the chart alone makes it worth it, and just kind of having a nice, like, reference for a glove pattern. I would say, if you have your own favorite glove pattern, go ahead and use that, and this is a nice chart to add in. So the pattern is written for one size, and they give it in terms of hand measurement, which I believe is measured around your palm, and it was slightly bigger than mine. I have pretty small hands, so I went down a couple of needle sizes to a US 1, as I used for my socks. So I was happy that I would get that nice dense fabric again, and so I did shorten the cuff. I kept all the same stitch counts and stuff because I went down a needle size. It would turn out small enough. I shortened the cuff a bit. I really like this length on me. I think the pattern if I knit the full length cuff, it would have gone down maybe an inch more. I didn't want too much I don't like tucking in gloves into my coat, and my coat has like kind of a fingerless glove built in, so it was kind of redundant. I also cast on in the gray, but then switched to knitting with the dark green because I wanted a contrasting edge. I think it just looks really cute. And yeah, and so continuing up the hand, I'm just kind of listing these notes in the order that they were knit in. I took very detailed notes on my Ravelry page because this was a pretty involved project. So when I got to the thumb, when you get to the thumb, you just place the thumb on a certain round in the chart, and it's an afterthought construction. So you put some stitches on waste yarn, and then you just continue with the glove and divide for the fingers. However, when I got to the rest of the chart, I kind of screwed it up. Like, some of these pips, they should have had like a hollow center. I screwed it up, and I'm like, it looks fine. I'll just make it a feature. And then I ended up modifying the chart even more when I got to here because I realized I wanted the fingers to be gray, not green. So I just kept, these swirlies were supposed to be gray on green, like down here, but I just continued the orange and made it orange on gray. So yeah, the pattern originally had you divide the fingers just all on the same round, so kind of on the even plane. However, you can see that my hand especially, I guess, I don't know if my hand is more sloped than most people, but a lot of human hands, the fingers the top of the palm is not a straight line. So some gloves have you divide for the pinky first, then knit a round or two more, and then divide for the rest of the fingers. What I decided to do was, and I found this out after I divided for a couple of fingers and they were turning out the palm was turning out way too tight. So I ripped out I actually like cut across the glove here, knit the palm, modified the palm, and then grafted the finger parts back on. That was an operation. I like it. So when I was re-knitting the palm, I actually did some short row shaping instead of trying to instead of modifying like when I'm dividing. It just felt right to me to still have all of the stitch division on one round. So what I did was I did a couple of, basically this slope up here is a short row wedge. And I used German short rows, so it's really invisible. And it fits my hand really well. I wrote the exact instructions I used, or I wrote down like instructions for what you could do to replicate that in my project page. So go check those out. And yeah, now it fits great. So this also helped. It really was important that the palm fit well, because this afterthought thumb does not give you as much room as if it had a gusset. I'm fine with this. I think in future gloves I might make, I have like my full range of motion. There's some pinching if I move my thumb too far back. So I think in future gloves I will definitely do a thumb gusset, and I might even do a reverse gusset, kind of so your thumb, the glove's thumb, is kind of coming out of a diamond. Kind of like how in Ganzis they have a diamond in the armpit gusset to just create more, to just free up more motion. But anyway, oh, and then the fingers were slightly narrowed for my small hands. And then when I picked up the thumb, it was a really neat construction. Yeah, and with the way you do have a couple of holes when you pick up the stitches on waist yarn, but those can be closed up using your ends, and with stranded color work, you have a lot of ends there that you can use to seal up the holes. I continued the chart up the thumb a little teeny bit, a simplified version of the chart, just because the pattern originally did not have any color work on the thumb, and I thought that would look a little weird just to have this solid colored thumb coming out of the band of color work. So, last cool thing I want to tell you about this pair of gloves is why I can use them with touchscreens. So in this gray, you can't see it, but there, you can see it a little bit. Do you see some glints, some shimmer in the pad of my finger? So when I got to the fingertips, as I was knitting with the gray yarn, I added in some stainless steel yarn, which is a conductive material. It allows charges and currents to flow. And in simple terms, basically your phone touch screens work because your fingers they all have a little bit of a little teeny layer of charge covering the screen. And they work when your finger touches them because your finger can also conduct charges, and that creates a change in the voltage, and that's a signal that your phone's computer can process. So normally when you wear like a pair of wool gloves, wool does not conduct very well at all. It's very insulating against heat and electricity. So, so that's why it blocks your finger from working with your touchscreen. However, if you have a conductive yarn like stainless steel in there, then it will touch your screen and let charges flow as if you were not wearing gloves. So I am just really happy with that, because I had a cone of stainless steel yarn from my lab, which I looked at the price, is pretty pricey. I only used a little bit of it, so you don't have to get your own big, huge cone. They're like $40 or $50 for a pretty small weaving cone. So you can get little bobbins of conductive thread. They're marketed as sewing thread, but you can totally just knit with them. The stainless steel has been the most yarn-like that I've found, and it doesn't interfere with it. You don't feel it at all. It's not like crunchy or anything. And so yeah, you can get little bobbins of conductive sewing thread from sites like Adafruit, Spark Fun, Adafruit I would definitely recommend, because, well, one, they're a woman-owned company. They do great stuff with promoting different, like, just gender diversity in STEM and tech. And they also do a lot of stuff that is focused on wearable technology. So they just have more stuff that might relate to like conductive yarns, conductive threads. So that's it for my Blue Hour gloves. Yeah, they're super comfy, but now my hand is getting very warm because I don't need it in here in my room. All right, and then the last knitting project I have to show you. It's an update. I haven't shown it in forever. It's my sock yarn scrap blanket, so that's why I'm calling this episode the Sock Scrap Spectacular, because all of these are with sock / fingering weight yarn scraps. So I started this almost 2.5 years ago. It's my sock yarn blanket, but I didn't want to do the Cozy Memories blanket because that doesn't use up all of the scraps. You just use up a little bit in the mitered square, and then you still have a little bit left. So I wanted a pattern where you could just go until you ran out of yarn. And that happens to be the 10-stitch blanket by Frankie Brown. So you've probably seen it. It's a blanket where you start with a garter square, and you do mitered corners to keep turning it around in a spiral, and you join as you go. It's kind of where I got the inspiration for the join method in the Tabba socks, actually. So, here it is, here's my blanket as it stands right now. It's gotten, it covers my lap when I work on it. It was hibernating for a while, and then I picked it back up when, oh yeah, I got injured, like, right before Thanksgiving break, and so my thumb was injured. I had a cooking accident, and I couldn't do any intense knitting. I could just do plain garter stitch, and so that's when I got this blanket pattern, blanket project out of storage. And yeah, I've now worked on an entire round of it because also I am kind of in a lull with projects. I haven't picked up anything that's like a super interesting project, and I don't think I've really had the brain space for it. So I've just been working on this. This thing is nice and trusty. It's always there. It's always going to be the same thing. So I just pick it up all the time. So I could probably, again, I could list off all the yarns that I've used in this. This is a yarn that I got from a friend back in New Jersey. Hey, Beth, I don't know. This is, what was I going to say? Regia. This is Regia, this is like Ancient Arts and so on. But anyway, I don't want to bore you with all of that. So this blanket, the pattern I have modified to 20 stitches because I'm using fingering weight yarn, whereas the original pattern's written for worsted weight yarn. I did not want to be doing knit 10 stitches in fingering weight, turn, knit 10 stitches back. It would just be way too much turning. Knitting 20 stitches is a nice rhythm. It's a nice length of my row, and then I don't mind turning and turning back again. So yeah, it's nice. It's also a nice width of the stripes. Like if it was 10 stitches, these would be really narrow spirals. And so the only like color management thing I'm doing is that I definitely switch colors when I reach a corner piece, just because I like this I like the idea of having an X of contrasting corner squares. But between the corners, when I'm just kind of on the straight edge, I just join on the scraps as they go, and I actually split splice them. Even though these are superwash sock yarns, honestly, if you torture the yarn enough, so I will pick apart the plies, cut off half the plies, and then just felt them together, and it works. Plus, after you knit it into such dense garter stitch, it won't come out anyways, even if the felting is a little less solid than if you were using non-superwash wool. So yeah, just fuck up your sock yarns. All right, that's all though. That's it for knitting. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a break to drink water and stuff. Oh, I forgot. Whoops, sorry. That was in my notes. So, my last yarn project that I have to show is a needle, or actually hook adjacent project. The last thing that I will be able to do on my 2018 Make 9 is to crochet a top that I put on. The pattern is Portal by Mermaid Cat Designs. It's a really nice cold shoulder, nice like cold shoulder crop top, but it's not super cropped. So it's very wearable. I like the look of a lot of like crochet crop tops and bralettes, but honestly, like, I don't have the confidence to wear one of those tops out alone, and they would just be layering pieces, and that's kind of a shame because I put all that work into making it, so I want to show off the entire thing. So I found a not as cropped thing that I would be comfortable wearing alone without layering, and it's her Portal top, cold shoulders. There's a nice like embossed diamond on the front, and it's crocheted with fingering weight yarn. So I got this Knit Picks Lindy chain yarn for it. I really like this golden yellow, and it's a very summery color. So I'm looking forward to that project. The colorway is Honey. All right, that's actually it. So I'll take a quick break and then be right back. All right. Okay. Not wiggling anymore? All right. So, as I was saying, that is the last, like, thing that I will be able to show on the screen. So, if you've been caring about visuals, I'm sorry, that's it. The rest of it's just going to be me talking about what I've been doing. If you're just here for the audio anyways and you have me playing in the background, well then that's great. Just keep on listening. So, that's it for knitting. So, we're going to move on to spinning. Nah, just kidding. I have not been spinning, which is... So, let's move on to weaving. So, again, all of my weaving takes place in my lab at work. I'm not able to bring it back here because it's just not in a state where it's not like I'm not allowed to bring it back. It's just that none of it's in a state that I can kind of detach it from the loom and bring it. So, I have been doing some card weaving, and that last episode I showed my first card weaving, that band that I finally got to take off the loom. I've been working on my second one, which has a more complex pattern where I'm not just turning the cards all at once. I do have to turn some cards forwards, some cards back. I'm almost done with it. I just wasn't able to finish it before I recorded this. But one difference I've noticed, a couple of main points. So my first strap was woven with cotton and pearl cotton, which is a mercerized gast cotton, I believe. It just is really shiny. It's very smooth. It's very sturdy. It's great for like things that are going to get a lot of wear, like towels. But also it just has such a nice look. So I was weaving with that cotton, and then my second card weaving is from wool sock yarn, actually. And what I've noticed is that it just feels very different because wool has so much bounce, whereas this mercerized cotton has no give. Just like, you know, if you had been knitting or crocheting with cotton versus wool, you're probably familiar with this difference. So this bounciness means that when I'm applying tension, because this is a weighted, kind of a loom that I have to provide the tension for as I attach one point to my window latch, and it feels a lot more bouncy. I feel like I am almost like just putting my entire weight into the loom. I actually wove a bit at like a public expo. It was just showcasing student work, and I had a couple of looms on display to help explain my project, and I had the card loom, and someone wanted to see it in action, so I actually had them use themselves as the counterweight, and they were basically, yeah, leaning all the way back. It was fun. It's really fun. I want to get into this, like, this could definitely be like a performance or like participatory art piece. of like being a counter, like participating in a backstrap weaving process where you're the counterweight, or like the audience is the counterweight or something. Anyway, so one thing was, now that, I mean, before it was still kind of backstrap weighted, it was tied to, one point's fixed to my window latch in my office. The other point was tied around my, the arm of my office chair. So I've noticed that that really affected my weaving posture. Now that the strap is long enough that I actually take it tied around my waist and it serves as its own backstrap while I'm weaving. But that has made a huge difference in how nice the weaving feels. When I was weaving with the loom tied to my office chair, because I would have to lean off to the side, once I actually like pulled some muscles in my back and I was out for a day. So really watch your posture when you're weaving. Whoops. Yeah, the backstrap is a lot better because you can tie it so that the strap is not off to the side, but is coming out of the center of your core. So it's just a lot better on your shoulders, your back muscles, everything. So watch your posture when you're weaving, y'all. I need to be better about my posture, because also when I weave for, hours at a time. But that's card weaving. It's a very nice portable method. Just wasn't able to get it to a point where I brought it back to show you. And it's something that I do want to keep exploring as a different way of interacting with weaving. It's a very different way of forming the fabric, and there's so many design possibilities for it. I want to get into double card weaving, so you can make a double-faced fabric, and that's how you can more easily make like text. So I'm really interested in that. And besides card weaving, I've of course been doing some jacquard weaving in my lab, because we got our big TC2 digital jacquard loom up and running. So yeah, it's just been great. We finally can get some projects and concepts on the loom. And my advisor and I have been playing a lot with multi-layered fabrics. If you go all the way back to my episode where I first went to the Jacquard Center workshop, I really got into double woven fabrics with very different designs on each face. We've been going up to triple and quadruple layers. The current concept that I'm exploring now is just more double woven fabrics where the designs are very different, but I'm also trying to work in texture. So my idea was that one face says "Hello World," just the text as a picture, and the other side was supposed to be, it was supposed to be like a multi-textured design, and the back is just a series of dots that show the binary encoding of those letters. So what I wanted the dots to be very textured, like you could run your hand over and feel like a zero, binary code, zeros and ones. So 0 would just be flat, flush against the fabric, but a 1 would be a very textured, bumpy circle. And my challenge, the thing I've been learning with this project is how to coordinate the different textured yarns and have them, because I'm weaving this as a double-faced fabric, how to get the 2 layers to build at the same rate so that your weaving stays nice and even. And it depends a lot on what structure you choose. So I ended up looking at what I ended up using, that I'm just kind of weaving the file right now, is each layer kind of consists of its own ground fabric, and that textured yarn is really only on the surface when it needs to be. But besides that, it's tucked beneath or between the layers so that it's not contributing to the buildup of the fabric. However, it's creating this really nice squish in the fabric, which I am in love with, and I can't wait to be done with this thing. I've actually been really worried about running out of yarn, so I sampled some little parts of the design a couple times, and actually I've just been like sitting down. They're now like rolled beneath the loom, and I'm just sitting at the loom like with a little crochet hook, just kind of like ripping out the yarn to try to reclaim it. And it's fun. It's kind of fucking up my shoulders. I really need to take care of my body. So I actually ordered like massage tools for my lab. Mostly I've been using them, but like a foam roller or some tennis balls to like work out knots. Take care of your bodies, y'all. One more thing that this is more of a kind of computer science-y programmy note, and I hope it doesn't like turn people off, but one thing, weaving does involve a lot of computation. If you're handling these complex patterns, you have to deal with mechanisms to kind of control that, how the information's getting processed and how it's getting expressed in your fabric, and your loom is really the computer that's translating your code, your design into a product. And so one thing is you notice that there are a lot of kind of procedures and algorithms in weaving. So one thing I've been doing is, so in weaving, you can make a nice selvage in your fabric with a floating selvage. So you have, if this was a frame loom, you just have a yarn that's on either side of your work that's not threaded. It just remains in a neutral position where, and then if your yarns, the yarns that you're actually weaving the pattern with, are going up and down, the neutral yarn, the edge, the selvage yarn is floating in between. And basically every time you throw the shuttle, your yarn has to go over and then come out under. And because your yarns are always wrapping around the edge of your work, it creates a really nice selvage for your work. So the TC2 does not have a neutral position. All of your yarns are down and then they come up to make the pattern. But you can actually, so I found the blog post, and I'll try to find it again, on simulating a floating selvage on a woven fabric. And basically whenever you have to pay attention to how your shuttles are moving through the design, and whenever your shuttle is coming in on the rightmost yarn has to stay down, and the leftmost yarn, the leftmost warp end has to be up. And then if your shuttle's coming in from the left, vice versa. And so because the software that we're developing software in our lab, more details on that to come, because we're going to make it open source. It's just still in progress. But because that software already has a feature, thanks to my awesome lab mate, who's a way better programmer than I am, there is a shuttles feature that simulates the motion of your shuttles going through the fabric. And so you kind of have to, now that there's this guide for your shuttle choreography, you can just generate this kind of pixel, because I'm not making sense at all, but you feed in a bitmap as a design to this loom. And so basically to create your floating selvage, you just have to fill the first and last columns of pixels with a pattern that corresponds to your the sequence for your selvage. So that's what I'm I'm gonna make that my winter break project, to just get oriented with like diving into someone else's code, and managing all these files, because this is, I've programmed stuff for classes before, so that's only been, only ever 1 or 2 files, nothing that's ever been integrated into an entire piece of software. So it will give me some experience with that, and I think it's a feature I can definitely code. So yeah, it's just cool that I'm able to combine all of my skills in programming and tech with my fiber craft. And so yeah, I tested out the principles without the code, but just like manually putting in my black and white pixels up the first and last columns in Photoshop. And that's worked really great. Now feature that I want to code in will just kind of automate that process. Or at least make it faster. I think I can make it pretty smart, but I might have to get multiple modes of like, oh, let the computer fill it in for you. Oh, or do you want like your own control of the salvage? Well, let's have, you can trade off like kind of how much the computer's assisting you versus how much you're just giving it commands and telling it to fill. But yeah, it's really cool. I'm really enjoying my research. So if you're curious about jacquard weaving, I understand that I am in a really privileged position to have access to this loom. If you're in a community where at a near university or someone with a jacquard loom, it's really a privilege. It's just so cool. So some books that I've been looking at in lab to help me with my design there's one called Digital Jacquard Design by Julie Holyoke. We got that for lab. It's very much written for a software that a lot of people use for jacquard weaving is Araweave, A-R-A-H. I don't know like how many weavers I'm talking to, so I apologize if this is like spelling things out a little too much and you're like, okay, Chanel, I know. So that has been really helpful because she has all these examples of designs and how she breaks it down into kind of the different surface effects that get expressed in each part of the design, and how the designer has considered the ways that these weave structures are compatible and so on. It's a massive book. It's also just really pretty. And then the next book that I feel like is a little more practical, especially if you're just getting started, is called The Woven Pixel. It's actually available as a free PDF if you search up handweaving.net, Woven Pixel. And it's how to create designs in Photoshop for jacquard and dobby looms, both of which are like computerized looms that have a very wide array of design possibilities because they're computerized and they help you out with these more complex patterns. Sorry for the noise. That was my computer. But that's it for weaving. It's just, it's a lot of geeking out. My advisor and I have been calling it weave math. So we're one thing I want to do is to get more kind of public documentation out on how we're designing this stuff, because it would also help us get in touch with other people who are doing this kind of weaving and computational design. So we might be putting out a GitHub page or a blog-like style thing, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. But that's it for weaving, and that's really it for like the actual crafty things. The rest of it, it's just gonna be me blabbering. So I have a section of On My Radar. I've been geeking out about a lot of stuff, and one thing I've been binging on is a podcast called Hello from the Magic Tavern. I've definitely been falling into this like kind of fantasy fiction geek hole. And Hello from the Magic Tavern is just wacky goodness. It's a podcast I sum it up as if Lord of the Rings, if the Fellowship was an improv group that wasn't getting any shit done, and they were just sitting around the tavern and drinking. And so the premise is that a guy from our world falls into a magical portal from Chicago and lands into this Middle-earth-like world. And he has a bit of a Wi-Fi connection, so he's just interviewing all these fantasy creatures and people and telling the Earth about this world. It's hilarious. It's just what I need to like get my mind off of things. If I'm stressed out, it's very funny. Yeah, it's good. And then like I was originally listening to it as just kind of background noise, because if you listen to like, you know, the 100th episode or something, it just sounds like, I don't know what's going on, but these guys are cracking jokes and oh, it's great. And then I started on a whim, I started back at the first episode, and I'm like, holy shit. These guys have been... There are hundreds of episodes worth of inside jokes built up, and, like, a plot. So I'm just going to listen to it from the beginning and catch up all the way. So I've been binging on that. It's also great because, yeah, with weaving in a lot of these repetitive tasks, it's hard to watch something, but it's great to listen to something, especially now that I have wireless Bluetooth headphones, it also helps tune out the clanging noise from weaving on this loom, the clanging and the whooshing because of the vacuum pump. So it's great. I've also been listening to... I've talked about Critical Role before, but now they have their own YouTube channel. And they're putting out a lot of just great content. Besides just a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors playing D&D. They're really showing the kind of the people behind this game. And it's just all been really wholesome. You can tell that they're all really great friends and they all care about each other genuinely. So there's a show called... One of their shows is All Work, No Play, where two of the players talk about... Really just kind of chat. You can tell they're best friends. They're two dads, so they talk a lot about their kids and how much they love them. And then they try some silly activity with their friends, and it's just a good time. And then you have a show called Between the Sheets, which is an in-depth, very personal interview show with the cast. Well, this first season was with the cast of Critical Role, and you really get an honest look at what's happened in their lives, what experiences have led them through their career, through coming to this game. This game that means a lot to them, because when you stick with a social group for years, you build a bond, but also Dungeons and Dragons as a like collective storytelling mode really lets you process a lot of heavy stuff. So it does get pretty serious and touches on some sensitive topics, but I highly recommend it if you're kind of looking for some emotional processing. I really empathized with everyone, and it's good for balancing my kind of escapism of just wanting to laugh at everything and with like, okay, I should read/listen to stuff to really kind of like heal emotionally from my past experiences, because sometimes I've learned that I am not the best at processing things in conversation with people. I do need a lot of like alone time and thinking time, and so content like this kind of helps seed my alone reflection, my like solo reflections and meditations, and gives me the brain space to come back to a conversation with someone else and be better in that moment. So yeah, that's been good. That kind of got more serious than I was intending, but I hope someone relates to that. I hope that like like my episodes will be good for people and it's not just me talking into my phone camera. But that's Critical Role, the YouTube channel overall. And so the last thing on my radar is, because I just saw this last night, was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That was an awesome movie. I saw it with my friend, and we went to, it was cheap movie night, and I had zero expectations going in. I don't really keep up with like what movies are hot. I had heard some hype about the Spider-Man movie, and I knew it was not just another Spider-Man movie. But at this point, I'm pretty ambivalent to superhero movies. Everyone was super hyped about Avengers Infinity War. I'm like, the movie's out. Everyone's talking about it. And while I was like Skyping with my brothers, I was just looking up the spoilers on Wikipedia, and I'm like, I just don't care. I'm gonna spoil myself so that I know what everyone's talking about, but I don't want to see this movie. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was just awesome. It's a fully animated superhero movie, so it really takes advantage of that animation and makes all the action scenes dynamic, funny, a great mix of cartoony but also very grounded in reality. It's set in an alternate New York, and the details they get just right, like the subway voices, the intercoms, the griminess of some of the New York settings. And the characters are just so sweet and relatable, and you just root for them the whole time. It's about Miles Morales, who is an Afro-Latino kid. So he's just super sweet. It's great to see more diversity in superhero movies. And his relationship with his parents is great. Yeah, it's just overall really awesome. It was visual overload a lot of the times in the best way possible. It's go see it if you want to have a good time. It's great. And it like walks the fine line between like not taking itself seriously, but like also being respectful of the legacy of superhero, like kind of superhero culture. It's a huge love letter to the Spider-Man universe, but at the same time, it's not afraid to have fun with it. So it's just awesome. There were several moments where I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing, just like in the theater. Definitely go see it. That's it. That's what's been on my radar, and that's what's been kind of going on emotionally, or yeah, psychologically. But like, oh, internally maybe. Okay, so that I was trying to transition into life updates. So as I said, it's been pretty busy because of research and stuff. And school and settling back into student life. I'm done with my first semester, which is great. I had 2 presentations, and then for one of those presentations, I had a report to finish writing. But then I'm done. I had no exam, so like this week, I'm only flying out this Saturday. So I have an entire week to kind of work on stuff, catch up on reading, do some research, but also take a lot of time for myself. But before that, yeah, it was pretty hectic. So like before Thanksgiving, that was the big rush to get the loom up and weaving and running, because we were having Catherine Amadei of the Jacquard Center and like TC2 Extraordinaire come. She actually recently appeared on the Gist Yarn and Fiber podcast. You should go listen to her interview there. She's just so inspiring to talk to, and she just knows so much. But yeah, she was coming the 2 days before Thanksgiving break. We got to hang out with Barry Schacht and Jane Peacock. It's like, oh my god, so starstruck right there. But yeah, it was kind of like captaining a ship. It was definitely not something I could have done alone. And so I had free reign from my advisor and another professor that we collaborate with, to basically command the people in both of our labs to try to get this ship running. Everyone had pitch in to wind the warp, to thread the loom, because we have 1,320 threads. That number is burned into my brain. And it's basically like threading 1,320 needles. You just have to poke each warp end through the eye of the needle and then pull it through the reed. And it was a process that took a week. About 10 people pitched in. To keep myself sane, I was actually taking data and like seeing how much progress we were making each day, and I was able to like share it with everyone, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cool to just get statistics on our work." But yeah, it was an effort it was a process to get everyone coordinated, and I'm really like kind of becoming the like equipment manager. of my lab, and I'm in charge of all of this weaving equipment, but I'm still a pretty new weaver. So I'm hoping it's not a case of the blind leading the blind. It's just like a slightly more experienced beginner leading a bunch of less experienced beginners. My internet keeps cutting out. That's why it's making that sound. So yeah, when it got to Thanksgiving break, I got sick. I was really overworking myself. I had put in 2 consecutive weekends without break, and I didn't have any time off, kind of like 2 weeks before break. When I got to break, I got something flu-like, and I got over it mostly, so I was still able to hang out with my parents. We road tripped up to the Santa Cruz area in the Bay Area to hang out with my brothers, because they go to school there, and it was easier to for me to fly to Vegas, and then us to road trip up to California, and then I actually flew out from San Jose, then to like fly the 2 of them to Vegas, and me to Vegas, and that would just be a lot more travel and money too. So it was fun, and I was working on my gloves during break, and then when I came back I got sick again. So it's been a month of just shitty health. I think I got sick because, again, I got back, bunch of new germs, still pretty stressed, and yeah, I'm trying to finish out this year taking a little better care of myself. It really touched upon a lot of, like, my mental and physical health have really been entangled in the past couple of years. And I felt so, like, one of my fears is being kind of emotionally and psychologically toxic to the people around me, and being sick and contagious. Like, I was like, oh my god, my worst fear is coming true. Like, I am the monster that I see myself as, and it just brought it to such an extreme that I'm like, hey, maybe I should finally, like, get on board with improving this and getting better, because I have, for a period since the summer, been in a pretty low state of self-esteem, not feeling like I deserved to get better from my past traumas, and I see, like, how shitty it can be to the people around me, so I want to be good for them. And that's my 2018, like, kind of, yeah, emotionally, it's been hard. There's been a lot going on. I moved across the country again. And in terms of my making, I feel like I did get a lot accomplished, though. I got my wheel earlier this year. In terms of my 2018 Make 9, I should post an Instagram update. But so my 9 was my Druid Circle sweater, my Klein sweater, which I'm wearing now, my Blue Hour gloves. So I got 2 in this episode, 2 off my Make 9 list. My Des chain top, which I showed in a previous episode. Rumpelstiltskin socks, I've also shown. My Excuse Me shawl. I had a pie shawl on my list. Unfortunately, that was the only one I never got to. I have my Portal crochet top, which is needle adjacent. And then my last one was carding and spinning some Rolex, which I worked on, but didn't make any, like, showable progress. It's on my wheel right now. So, but yeah, I got to 8 out of the 9, and that's really good for me. I am still interested in doing that pie shawl. It's also a chance to reflect on, like, okay, if I didn't get to a project, why didn't I get to it? Was it that it wasn't really a good goal for me? Because it's fine to rethink your goals. Is it just not interesting to me anymore? I am still interested in the pie shawl. It just wasn't a well-formed concept, and I'm not really... It wasn't an idea that crystallized in my mind during this year, so I just think it needs a little more time. I might leave it off my next year's just to come back to the project sometime, because my thing with pie shawls is that I wouldn't wear them. A pie or a circular shawl. It doesn't have to be a pie construction per se. But I would definitely use it as a project. I have a nice circular table, so it could be a good tablecloth. But yeah, I need to think more on like why I want that specific project. And it needs to be compelling enough for me, not just like, oh, this technique is vaguely interesting. I want the object or different dimensions of why I would want a finished item. So it's good to see that going into next year's Make 9. I do want to do it again. And I think next year I will focus more on using the yarn I already have and making that my Make 9. Kind of pick my 9 goal projects so that each of them use stash, yarn, or fiber. And yeah. So it feels weird to be optimistic. I feel like I was in survival mode for so long that I just didn't have the space to be optimistic. If anything, I was really pessimistic about my chances of, getting any further. And now I'm in a position where I am a lot more stable. I'm more happy. I have a more supportive community around me. And these tensions of like navigating who's around me and how I'm interacting with them, it's stressful, but it's kind of refreshing to have these things to care about again. I'm not super isolated. Not that I want to diminish the relationships I had in New Jersey, but I just did not have as many people around me that were my age, that were interested in similar things, that I hung out with regularly. It's just been a lot nicer of a social environment here. So yeah, I hope that continues into next year. And I hope that your 2019 will be great and have a good rest of your 2018. Take care of yourself and just keep crafting. And this kind of went into wrap up. Yeah, so again, I'm really happy to close out this year, 2018. And I hope to see you in the new year. And look out for upcoming designs from me. I am also still a player in Dungeons and Drop Stitches, which is still going on. So we should have our next session soon. Keep an eye out on that. Our marvelous DM, Melissa Skananigans, released a pattern that is not going to benefit from me mentioning it because she's already super famous. She released the Northeasterly blanket, so you should go check that out. It's a super fun pattern. I'm thinking about incorporating it in my scraps. And yeah, just happy making, everyone. Stay creative, stay curious, and always keep learning. Bye. Love you. I think that's stable. Okay, it kind of wiggles around. Hopefully. Okay. So I should just